Keanu Reeves walks into Kingston Auto, casually admiring the cars. The showroom is spotless, designed for high-end buyers. Richard Langley, the car dealership manager, spots Keanu. The worn jeans, scruffy beard. He instantly assumes he's a nobody. Another window shopper wasting time. With a forced smile, Richard approaches. "Can I help you?" His tone is dismissive. Keanu nods. "Beautiful cars. Just looking." Richard barely hides a smirk. "Yeah, well, they're not exactly cheap. Maybe check out something in your budget." Keanu says nothing, just moves toward a luxury SUV. Richard steps in front of him. "Sir, if you're not here by, I'll have to ask you to leave." Keanu studies him for a moment, then nods. "All right." He turns and walks out. Richard scoffs. Unbelievable. From the side, an elderly salesman, Frank, watches in shock. He knows exactly who Keanu Reeves is. What just happened wasn't just another rude dismissal. It was about to become one of the most uplifting stories in the dealership's history. Richard had no idea that the man he just kicked out was the new owner. Kingston Auto had once been the crown jewel of luxury car dealerships in the city. Known for its impeccable service and high-end clientele, it was the place where the wealthy came to indulge in their love for fine automobiles. But over the past few years, its reputation had taken a hit. Sales had dropped, complaints had risen, and customers who once praised the dealership now avoided it altogether. At the heart of the problem was Richard Langley. As the dealership's manager, Richard had turned the showroom into his personal kingdom, catering only to those he deemed worthy of his time. If someone didn't walk in wearing an expensive suit or flashing a high-limit credit card, they were dismissed without a second thought. He had no patience for those who couldn't immediately afford the luxury vehicles on display. Unbeknownst to Richard, however, the dealership had recently been sold. The new owner wanted to remain anonymous for now, quietly observing the business before making any changes. And that owner was none other than Keanu Reeves. Keanu wasn't just a Hollywood actor. He was a man who valued kindness, respect, and humility, qualities he had seen lacking in the service industry far too often. When he heard about Kingston Auto's decline, he saw an opportunity to turn things around. He wasn't just buying a business. He was investing in its people, hoping to restore the dealership's former glory. Earlier that day, he had decided to pay an unannounced visit. Dressed in his usual laid-back style, worn jeans, a simple black t-shirt, and a leather jacket, he strolled into the showroom to get a first-hand look at how things were being run. He hadn't even been inside for more than a few minutes when Richard approached him with thinly veiled disdain. Frank, one of the oldest employees at Kingston Auto, had been watching the interaction from a distance. He had worked at the dealership for decades and had seen its ups and downs. Unlike Richard, Frank treated every customer with respect, regardless of their appearance. He had also been a fan of Keanu Reeves for years and recognized him instantly. As Keanu turned to leave, Frank hurried after him, his heart pounding. He couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. "Mr. Reeves," he called out, his voice a mix of excitement and concern. Keanu paused, turned to face the elderly salesman. A warm smile crossed his lips. "Frank, right?" Frank nodded, slightly out of breath. I just wanted to say, it's an honor to meet you, and I'm really sorry about what just happened in there." Keanu chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Don't be. It was enlightening." Frank hesitated, glancing back toward the dealership. "Are you really?" Keanu placed a reassuring hand on Frank's shoulder. "Let's keep that between us for now." With a grateful nod, Frank watched as Keanu walked away. Inside, Richard smirked to himself, believing he had successfully rid the dealership of yet another unworthy customer. But he had no idea what was coming next. The next morning, Richard walked into Kingston Auto feeling as confident as ever. He adjusted his cufflinks and took a deep breath, ready to start another day of doing what he did best, keeping out undesirable customers and catering to those who looked the part. But something felt off. As he stepped inside, he noticed small groups of employees whispering amongst themselves. They weren't huddled over their usual morning coffee or prepping the showroom for the day. No, they were murmuring, their eyes darting toward the center of the showroom. Richard followed their gaze and his stomach tightened. There, standing with a poised presence, was Keanu Reeves, but he looked entirely different from the man Richard had dismissed yesterday, gone with the casual jeans and leather jacket. Today, Keanu was dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit, exuding an air of quiet authority. He wasn't alone, either. Senior executives from corporate headquarters stood beside him, their expressions unreadable. Richard felt his throat go dry. What was happening? Clearing his throat, he approached cautiously. Mr. Reeves, Keanu turned to face him, his expression calm yet firm. Good morning, Richard. Something about the way Keanu said his name sent a chill down Richard's spine. He forced a smile. It's nice to see you again. What brings you here? Keanu glanced at the employees around them, then met Richard's eyes. I think it's time we had a proper introduction. He took a step forward. I'm Keanu Reeves, the new owner of Kingston Auto. A heavy silence fell over the showroom. Richard's smile wavered. He blinked. His lips parted slightly as if to respond, but no words came out. Meanwhile, the employees exchanged excited glances. Frank, standing toward the back, beamed with pride. He had known the truth before anyone else, but seeing Richard's stunned face was still incredibly satisfying. Keanu gestured for the employees to gather around. I want to hear from you, he said, his voice carrying authority but also warmth. Tell me about your experience working here. What's the culture like? At first, there was hesitation. Employees looked at one another, unsure if they should speak up. But then Frank, emboldened by Keanu's presence, took a step forward. With all due respect, sir, Richard has made this place unbearable for most of us, Frank said, his voice steady. He treats customers like dirt if they don't look wealthy enough, and he does the same to his employees. A few others murmured in agreement. One by one, employees spoke up, detailing stories of Richard's arrogance, his habit of belittling staff, and his blatant favoritism toward high-profile clients. Richard's face turned red. His mind raced for a way to salvage the situation. This is all just a misunderstanding, he stammered, forcing a laugh. You see, I have to be selective about who we serve. It's about maintaining the brand image, Mr. Reeves. Keanu's gaze didn't waver. So, you think turning away potential customers based on their appearance is good for the brand? Richard swallowed hard. Well, Keanu folded his arms. Interesting, because yesterday I came in as an ordinary customer, and you dismissed me immediately. The employees gasped softly. Richard paled. That was just a test, Keanu said firmly, and you failed. Silence. Richard felt sweat bead at his temple. He opened his mouth to protest, but before he could, Keanu turned to the employees. Things are going to change around here. And with that, the real reckoning began. Keanu took a deep breath and turned toward the gathered employees. Let's not rely on just words, he said. Let's look at the facts. With a nod, one of the senior executives stepped forward, holding a folder. He handed it to Keanu, who flipped it open and held up the first page. This, Keanu began, his voice steady, is a collection of customer complaints over the last year. Every single one of these is about how poorly they were treated when they walked into this dealership. Many of them left and never came back. Richard stiffened. His eyes darted to the folder, as if hoping it would vanish into thin air. Keanu continued, flipping to another page. And this? Employee dissatisfaction reports. Staff members quitting because of toxic management. High turnover. Low morale. A pattern that all leads back to you, Richard. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Employees nodded in agreement, some crossing their arms, others staring at Richard with barely concealed frustration. Richard forced a nervous chuckle. Now, hold on a minute, this is just a smear campaign. People exaggerate. Customers complain about everything these days. Keanu remained unfazed. So, all these people are lying? Richard swallowed, but before he could respond, Keanu flipped to yet another document. And this one, he raised an eyebrow. This is a list of sales you personally blocked because you judged the customer by their appearance, including mine. A hushed silence fell over the room. Keanu took a step closer, lowering his voice just enough to make Richard feel the weight of his words. Richard, your actions haven't just hurt customers and employees. They've hurt this dealership's reputation, and I won't allow it to continue. Richard's face burned red. Look, Mr. Reeves, I was just doing what I thought was best for the dealership. Was it really for the dealership? Keanu interrupted, his tone sharp but controlled. Or was it about feeding your own ego? Richard opened his mouth, but no excuse came. His gaze flickered to the employees, to Frank, to the executives watching him with judgmental eyes. Keanu sighed. Here's what's going to happen. You have two choices. You can resign and walk away, or you can undergo training to fix your attitude and learn how to treat people with respect. Richard's breath hitched. His pride screamed at him to refuse, to argue, to lash out. But deep down, he knew he had no leverage. The employees waited, their eyes locked on him. After a long, agonizing pause, Richard clenched his jaw. Fine, he muttered. I'll do the training. You'll do more than just do it, Keanu replied firmly. You'll take it seriously, or you're out. Richard said nothing, his hands balling into fists at his sides. Keanu turned to the employees. Things changed today, he announced. For the better. A slow smile spread across Frank's face. The dealership was finally heading in the right direction. As the weeks passed, Kingston Auto transformed in ways no one had expected. Keanu's leadership brought a breath of fresh air, and his vision for the dealership quickly became a reality. The first major change? Customer service. Keanu ensured that every employee, from sales representatives to receptionists, received proper training on how to treat customers with respect and professionalism. The dealership no longer judged people by their appearance, but by their interest in buying a car. The shift was immediate. Word spread quickly that Kingston Auto was under new management, and foot traffic doubled within days. Meanwhile, Richard found himself struggling with the very thing he had avoided his entire career: accountability. The once arrogant manager was now required to take extensive training in customer relations and sales ethics. At first, he resisted. He rolled his eyes during sessions, muttered under his breath, and even tried to cut corners. But Keanu wasn't having any of it. One afternoon, Keanu pulled Richard aside. You don't have to like me, he said plainly, but if you don't change, you won't have a job. So what's it going to be? Richard hesitated, his pride still wounded. But as the days went on, something shifted. He began to see how his behavior had driven customers away. He overheard employees, people he had once bullied, talking about how much better the dealership had become. And he saw Frank, the man he had dismissed as too soft, now thriving under Keanu's leadership. Frank, to everyone's delight, had been promoted. His years of dedication, honesty, and kindness had finally been recognized, and he now held a senior position overseeing customer service. The other employees respected him deeply, and under his guidance, the team flourished. Keanu continued to visit the dealership, though never in an overbearing way. He checked in on employees, listened to their feedback, and made adjustments where needed. More customers walked in, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The atmosphere had changed. No more judgment, no more arrogance. Just good business built on trust and respect. Even Richard, though still adjusting, found himself in unfamiliar territory. He wasn't the top dog anymore. He wasn't feared or blindly obeyed. But for the first time in a long time, he was learning. And maybe, just maybe, that was a good thing. With time, Richard changed. Maybe not overnight, but little by little, he shed the arrogance that had once defined him. One evening, after a long day at the dealership, he approached Keanu, who was casually leaning against a sleek, newly arrived sports car. There was no audience, no pressure, just two men who had been on opposite sides of a lesson well learned. I judged you, Richard admitted, his voice quieter than usual. And not just you. I've been judging people my whole life. It cost me a lot more than I ever realized. Keanu turned to him with that same calm, understanding smile. Growth isn't about being perfect, Richard. It's about recognizing when you're wrong and doing something about it. Richard exhaled deeply, his shoulders less tense than before. I don't know if I'll ever be as good as Frank or as respected as you, but I'm trying, and I appreciate you giving me a second chance. Keanu clapped a hand on Richard's shoulder. Everyone deserves a shot at redemption. Just make sure you use it well. As they spoke, the dealership bustled around them, something that would have been unimaginable just months ago. Customers laughed as they tested cars. Employees smiled as they helped families find the perfect vehicle, and Frank, now in his well-earned senior position, guided a new hire through the showroom. Kingston Auto was no longer just another car dealership. It had become a place of trust, respect, and good business. But Keanu wasn't done just yet. His eyes flickered toward the newest car model displayed under bright showroom lights. A mischievous glint appeared in his gaze as he ran a hand along its polished exterior. "New model just arrived?" he asked Frank, who had walked up beside him. Frank chuckled. "Yeah, thinking of taking it for a spin?" Keanu smirked. Maybe I have another test in mind." The camera zooms out as Keanu, Richard, and Frank share a knowing look. The story may have reached its resolution, but who's to say the dealership wouldn't face another surprise test in the future? After all, lessons never truly end. The end, or is it